Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, Peak Performance Coach Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Well, welcome everyone to the Bamboo Lab. We have an amazing guest on here today, so button up and sit down. If you're driving, tune in. When you get home, listen again and take notes. All right, as of today, which is the 26th of October, 2022, I want to read our latest analytics. As of now, we're being subscribed to on 6 continents, 38 countries, 50 states, and 889 cities. As of this morning, about 30 minutes ago, actually. And I've got one really nice heart letter to read. This came in yesterday, and this lady said, "I listened to your podcast, Brian, and I really enjoyed it. Even while retired, I love being inspired by everyone's stories behind their success. Love your podcast interview, Brian. You have led an interesting life and have met some amazing people along the way. Keep up the great work. I'll be listening." Thank you so much, Bamboo Pack member. That means a great deal to me. All right, let's get started. Let's dissect. Today we have Stacy Weaver. And Stacy and I connected a few years ago on Facebook. I think I was coaching or working somebody within the company she works for now or worked for in the past. Stacy's a pretty interesting character, man. She started off in radio, then moved on to TV, and she was in the news. And she did that for several years and found that she was covering some pretty horrific stories. And in fact, she actually did some reporting in the Middle East after 9/11 aboard the USS Stennis in the North Arabian Sea. And she's won several awards throughout her career. And now she's this amazing, very charismatic host on a TV show now, which is a little lighter than dealing with horrific news. She's with Shop LC out of Austin, Texas, and I think they reached 77 million homes around the country. So we're going to hear her story. Stacy Weaver, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm super excited to be here with you today. It's absolutely an honor.
Well, we are excited to have you on today. This is going to be a lot of fun. So can you start off, Stacy? Can you tell us who you are? Tell the world where you came from.
Well, I grew up in Corpus Christi, which is in South Texas. And then when I was in the 8th grade, I moved to San Marcos, Texas, so more central Texas. I have 3 beautiful sisters. And growing up, my parents are divorced. And so I was fortunate enough to have 2 wonderful men in my life who are my dad. So that's kind of my childhood. What else would you like to know about that?
Well, where'd you go from there?
Well, after that, I went on to college. I had some wonderful experiences there. I went to school in Houston and also San Antonio and San Marcos. Growing up in San Marcos, Texas State that's the home for Texas State. So kind of made sense to go there. But I initially went to Houston, which is actually quite interesting because when I moved to Houston, I didn't have a car, and I thought, man, I wanted to get away from home, but I didn't have a car, and I thought, man, how in the world am I going to get to classes or get around? Because Houston's pretty big, Mm-hmm. And so I remembered that people at car dealership salespeople would get a demo car. And so I literally called all the different dealerships in Houston and asked, if their salespeople got a demo car. And I just marked off the ones that did. And then I went and interviewed, and I ended up selling cars in order to have a car to be able to go to school.
It's ingenious. I have a funny story. When I was sophomore year of college, I didn't have a car either, and I couldn't afford a car. So I went to the dealer. I don't even know what I was thinking. I went to the dealership, and it was when those Jettas were, or not Jetta, Berettas were out. And it was a red Beretta, and I really liked it. And the guy says, well, what do you do? I made a little bit of money doing something. I said, but I really don't have a job. I'm a sophomore in college in town. He goes, well, I can't sell you a car if you don't have a job. I said, well, then give me a job. So he did. He gave me a job. I was the guy the boy who prepped the cars after they were sold. I washed them, cleaned them, and used cars and new cars. And they let me buy a car from them within a couple of weeks. So.
Oh my gosh,
So
that's awesome.
ingenious.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I didn't know a thing about cars or how to sell them or anything, but I actually was quite successful at it. And I think it was solely because, I couldn't do a walk around that, there were some old guys there that could do an amazing walk around on the car and talk about the engine and all of that. And I would just talk about the cool stuff that the features that I thought were interesting, and ended up being quite successful at it. So it was a great experience.
Well, we're glad you didn't stay in that industry. We're glad you went out.
Yeah, me too.
Well, Stacy, growing up, who was your greatest inspiration?
Gosh, of course, God. Of course, my parents. My mom and I are super, super, super close. She's my best friend and has always been an inspiration to me. She, when my parents got divorced, she was single with 3 daughters by herself and worked really hard to, always make us feel loved. And we were definitely struggling, but I never felt that way growing up. She always made us feel like we were wealthy. She would spend her last dime on us. And so she was a massive inspiration to me. And for the sake of not being confusing, I'm going to call my dad, and my stepdad, who I call dad as well. I'll call him stepdad if I refer to him.
Okay.
But both of them quite successful. And so, of course, they were an inspiration as well. But I am a firm believer in drawing your inspiration from yourself. I think it's extremely important to inspire yourself. And I felt that way even as a young child. When I was in 5th grade, I wanted to try out for cheerleading. And I knew that I had to know how to do gymnastics. And I didn't know how to do gymnastics. And we couldn't afford for me to take gymnastics. So I started I knew a back handspring was kind of the basic thing that you needed to know how to do. So I would get on my mom's bed and, build up the courage to do a back handspring. Then I'd move out to the trampoline and try it there. And then I stood out in the yard for days with pillows behind me, just standing there with my hands up in up in the air, until I got the courage to go backwards. And I finally did it, landed on my head, but it broke the fear. And by the time I graduated from high school, I was able to do about 30 back handsprings in a row. I taught myself how to do a backflip with a twist. And I think it meant more to me because I never took a day of gymnastics classes. So that was kind of something that I don't know. I feel like I was kind of born with that, where, you do have to draw that from within. And that kind of, even going into when I first got the job in radio, I didn't have any experience in that whatsoever. I mean, I had sales experience. I'd worked at the car dealership and done, I'd done some various other jobs, but I didn't have any work experience in that. And I remember seeing the ad. It was in San Antonio at a radio station called KTSA, and they were looking for an overnight anchor. And I wanted that job so bad, but I didn't have any experience. And so I literally had a blank piece of paper. I knew if I took if I mailed in a regular resume that, with the sales experience, there's no way in the world I'd ever get that job. So I drove over there and asked if I could speak to the news director. And I don't know how it even happened that he came out and talked to me, because I don't know. I was blown away that he came out, but he met me in the lobby, and I handed him this blank piece of paper, and I said, listen, I saw an ad for your overnight news anchor, and I really, really want this job. I've been writing since I was a young child, and it's my passion. And if you give me the opportunity to do this, I promise you I'll be just as good or better than anybody else that you would hire with experience. And so he kind of looked at me funny, but he took me back and he said, let's do a demo tape real quick. And so I had to read the news. He handed me an AP wire and said, rewrite this and let's record you. And I did. And he gave me the job that day. So that kind of started off my career in radio.
What was the blank piece of paper for?
Because I didn't have anything on it that would apply to the job. So I handed it to him, and I'm like, I know this is blank, but I want you to know that I have the passion, and and that's kind of how I have felt with anything. If you want something in life, you have to go for it. And if I hadn't taken chances in my life, I would never have had the opportunities that I've had.
I love that story. That's so ingenious. You did that. You got that job in a very similar fashion the way you got the car when you were in college. Something a little creative. I love that.
Yes. And I'm so thankful that he gave me that opportunity.
So I'm going to pause for a minute and talk to the Bamboo Pack audience. I want to validate and capture what Stacy has said so far, and a couple of things that I really pulled out of this. Just think of the two examples she gave. We just mentioned them. She needed a car in college. So what she did is she would call all the dealerships to find out which dealerships offered a demo to their car salespeople. And she got a job and got a car. I mean, I never thought of that. I've never thought of it before. And then when she wanted to become the radio anchor, she handed him a blank piece of paper and said, this is what I know, but if you let me do it, I'll be the best damn anchor you have. I mean, that is pretty powerful. I love what you just said. We might have gotten today's title for the podcast, in that you have to find inspiration within yourself. And
absolutely.
I love that so much, because I think so often we're always looking for outside inspiration. I read a lot and I talk to a lot of people, and I get inspired from that. But really to look inward and say, it's got to come from here. It's got to come from that. I did an episode a few months ago, Stacy, called The Dark Side. And I described this dark side that I have inside of me, that we all have, that something that happened maybe traumatic to in childhood or whatever it might be, where you tends to burn your soul. And when you can look at that and say, wait a minute, that fire is always going to be there. But now if you can inspire yourself, you can turn that into that fire that's been burning you into fuel to, take you, to the next level. And that's that form of self-inspiration. I think that's very powerful. And you went back to that gymnastics example, talked about that. If I'm not mistaken, on your Facebook, there's a picture of you on a trampoline, kicked up in the air with your legs touching your feet, your hands touching your feet, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah. I still try to periodically do it. So I know that I still can.
That's great. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's so important for people to draw that from within, because so many times you can be disappointed, or you may think, I can't do that. I can't do what somebody else does. And, you think negative, because we're our biggest critics. And so I just, I try to teach my children that whatever your dream is, go for it. I mean, it can happen. Your passion and your drive can make things happen. And I just think it's so important to not rely on someone else to get you where you need to go or where you want to go.
I have a question that's not a normal question that I ask, but how do you deal with, how do you get mentally prepared to go on TV where 77 million households are viewing you? Is that something you just innately have, or did that come through experience from the radio, then TV, and doing the TV news? Or do you still get nervous, a little anxious before each performance?
I don't anymore. Of course, initially I did. But here's the thing, when I was in news, and pretty much with anything in life, I think it's important to know who your audience is and to speak to your audience, not as a group, but as one person. You're talking to them just like I'm talking to you today. So, when I was doing news, for instance, if I was doing a school board meeting or a city council meeting, now that can be really boring, right? So, I would pull out of whatever, I was a Texas legislature reporter for a while too. And again, that can be boring, but I would say, okay, if I'm the viewer, what do I want to know? What message am I going to get out of this? So I would pull that out instead of just being, well, today at city council meeting, it was, how is that going to affect me as the viewer? That's what I want to know. So I kind of did that with everything. And one of the things that was great, like with radio, was my news director, when I went because I did anchoring first and then I went into reporting, because with reporting, you can be more creative. And so I loved that about it. But I would be driving into work and think, I'm a super deep thinker. But I remember one day I was driving into work and there was a nun in the lane next to me. And she was driving there. And I looked over at her and I thought, man, I wonder what her life is like. It'd be so interesting to know. So when I got to work, I asked the news director if I could do a story on life as a nun. And so I got to interview all different types of nuns, cloistered nuns and just different walks of life. I got to interview a girl that was just starting out as a nun, and what made you decide that, and this type of generation, I can't imagine too many people wanting to be a nun. So it was so interesting to be able to do those kind of things. So again, I think now, if you look at it as you're talking to one person versus an audience, you don't really have that nervousness feeling that you're talking about.
I like that a lot. And that's one of the things my son said to me when I started the podcasting side gig. He said, Dad, talk as if you have 100 million people listening on your first episode, but only talk to one of them. I thought that's the best advice possible. And he said, exactly. I love that. Well, you live an interesting life. You have a job, a career that obviously most people don't. And you get to be seen by millions of people on a consistent basis. What have you seen as your biggest learning over the past 2 to 3 years, Stacy?
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hey, wellness coaches, practitioners, and healers, starting and growing your online business can make you feel like you're trying to cross the desert without a map. You want to know how to find clients who do the work. You want to bring in more money than you need each and every month. You want to know how to get more engagement on social media and feel more confident when you show up online. I'm Kendra Perry. I used to be a functional health coach, and now my mission is to help you create a business you love that brings you freedom plus income while transforming lives. Join me on the Wealthy Coach podcast to get the secrets and strategies to grow a wildly successful online virtual practice. You can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I think the biggest thing is that you have to live each day to the fullest. It's important to work to live, not live to work. So many times we do that, and then you're just existing. And I think if you kind of turn that around to where you're doing it because you want to live and truly, truly enjoying every single day of your life. Because for so long, I personally didn't do that. I just focused more on living to work. And so, and on top of that, I think it's vitally important to be a kind human being. You never know what somebody else is going through in their life, and you could totally turn their life around by being kind.
And when you just said work to live, not live to work, and I've heard that that advice so many times in my life, and it's still something I have to work on because I find myself constantly thinking about my client meetings the next day, or a speech I'm going to give, or the next podcast, or whatever it might be. And what I've noticed in my life, Stacy, is that for those people who truly dislike their jobs, they tend to have a less than beautiful personal life, and with it, they kind of go hand in hand. Those who truly love their careers and their calling, they tend to really have an amazingly creative, beautiful life. And I think for those people out there, for you Bamboo Pack member out there, if you find that your job, you don't like your job and it's affecting your personal life, one thing to look at it is look at your job as simply a tool or a resource that's giving you the ability to live a personal life. And the better you perform at that job, the better your personal life can become, the more opportunities you're going to have, the more freedoms and liberties you're going to have. So don't look at it as my job sucks, my life sucks. Make your job a little better to improve your personal life, and vice versa. Focus on yourself, that self-inspiration that Stacy talked about, outside of work, and that'll bleed over to your work life as well. So that's good stuff.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think that has, that's been my attitude. I had to work hard to get to where I've been and to have the experience that I've had. When I got to go to the Middle East after 9/11, that was the most incredible experience ever. But if I hadn't taken, other jobs to get to where I needed to be, you have to have a plan, you have to have a goal. And I do think that people need to go after their passions in life. And really, it should be a job that you enjoy. I get it. Like I said, I had to do some other jobs that were nothing that I wanted to do, but in order to reach the goals that I had to do that. And so, and I wouldn't have the experiences that I've had. That was like the most incredible thing. Like I said, going to the Middle East and being able to do that, it was kind of scary, but something that, memories are all that we have. That's what you take with you when you pass. It's the materialistic things don't. So I'm a firm believer in going after your passions so that you do enjoy each day.
I love that. But, I think what you said earlier is so important too, that sometimes we have to go through that grind of those baby steps of things we don't like to do to earn that position of where you are right now, where you are living your passion. So, or, living your calling. I had a Facebook friend of mine reach out to me just yesterday, messaged me and said, Brian, I need some advice. I just need to know what I should do to get healthier. And I said, well, I really don't know what you do now. And I said, then I said, pick 3 things to improve on this week. She said, I need more specifics. I said, well, do you walk? No. I said, go for 3 walks this week. That's it. Then report back to me on Friday or Saturday. Where are you at? Then we'll add to it. Those little baby steps of doing those little uncomfortable things, even though that's a micro example, we have to do that throughout our lives. If we're not happy with something, we want to get to somewhere. Just start with baby steps and do those little baby steps. Those things that you don't want to do those things, because they're more than likely the things that are necessary for you to get to that level where you are living your calling.
Absolutely. And I think the younger generations, it kind of breaks my heart a little bit because I feel like they do kind of expect things to be handed to them. And that's not the way that it is. You have to pay a little dues to reach the goals that you want. Amen.
That is for sure. I've had some crummy jobs, Stacy.
Me too.
But it's funny. One of my hardest job physically was I was a ditch digger on an island in Michigan, on an island here called Mackinac Island. And it was between freshman and sophomore year of college. It was the most physically demanding job that I have ever had. This island is just one big rock, really. And we had a pickaxe and a shovel. It was me and another guy right around my age. We became really good friends, and we just dug ditches because it's a historic island where there's no motor vehicles allowed, but they allowed backhoes and to come over because they had to put all the power lines underground to make it look more authentically historic. So between where the backhoes and all that couldn't go, that's where they sent me. And I loved it so much. I even listed on my LinkedIn profile. I don't know if it's still there, but it was. I think it's one of the jobs I've had, that and the financial advisor, then performance consultant. So, All right, now
That's
we're down
funny.
to the question that I always give my guests the opportunity to say pass on. But this is question number 6 on my list, and that is, and if you decide you want to answer it, the question is this: what's the most difficult thing, Stacy, you've ever gone through in life? And if you answer it, could you please share with us how you overcame that?
Well, there's actually a few pretty difficult things that I've encountered in my life. One, in 1997, I had twins. It was a very, very difficult pregnancy. And I went into labor at about 19 weeks, and I was hospitalized several times throughout the pregnancy. They were born at 30 weeks. For the first 2 weeks of their life, I couldn't touch them. They were in an incubator, and it was quite traumatic for me. They were in ICU for 3 months and then on heart monitors for 8 months once they got home. And it was, I think I spent about 2 years with no sleep while they were little. So that was the first thing. Wow. In 2007, I was 6 months pregnant, went in for a doctor's appointment, and found out that my baby had passed. That was one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with in my life, because a week prior, we had a sonogram and the baby was perfectly fine. So that was very difficult. But out of that, I have my miracle baby, my 13-year-old Rylan, because had I given birth to the other child, I would not have her today. And she was quite a miracle, because it was close to delivery. I think I was like 37 weeks. And I knew something was going on. Something was wrong. And so I went to the hospital. The doctor said, no, everything's fine. A nurse came in and she told me that she was horrible to me. She told me that you just don't want to be fat anymore. You just don't want to be pregnant. And I'm like, I ended up in kind of a screaming match with her, because I'm like, no, there's something wrong with my baby. I know there's something wrong with my baby. And makes me want to cry thinking about it. Yeah. But so the doctor finally agreed to induce, but I had to sign a paper saying that it was against their recommendation. So I said, well, I'd like to do the extensive sonogram first, and if everything's fine, then I'll leave. But they were really trying to get me to leave that day. So he does the sonogram and immediately says, oh my gosh, we have to induce immediately. She has no amniotic fluid. So they induce. I have my baby girl. She ends up with a hole in her lung due to lack of amniotic fluid, and was in ICU for a little bit. And the head nurse comes in and apologizes for the first nurse that was so hateful to me. And she said, Stacy, I just wanted to tell you that had you listened to us and gone home, you would have had a stillborn baby. Oh my goodness. So thankfully, you fought for yourself. So that is the third hardest thing that I've had. One of the biggest things was my dad, stepdad, in 2002. This was a big deal to me. And I'm sorry to take so much of your time with this, but this was a huge deal. So my mom had come to San Antonio. I was a reporter down there at the time, and we had lunch together, and she was going to go meet my dad for dinner. And he worked in Austin, and they were meeting back in San Marcos, which was in between San Antonio and Austin. So she ends up calling me, and she's like, she tells me that she tried calling him. He didn't answer. She tried calling the house. He didn't answer. She calls him back again, and the police answer his phone. Something had happened on his way home. So turns out he had a little bit, kind of like a little aneurysm. And they take him to the hospital. They thought he was having a stroke. He was not, but they gave him medicine for a stroke. And he ended up having massive swelling on the brain due to having high blood pressure. So the medicine that they gave him for the stroke actually caused that to happen. He likely would have walked away after a few days in the hospital had they not given him the medicine. Well, he was a guy that wasn't one that said, I love you a lot. I think I heard I love you once in my life growing up from him. And so I wasn't one that would do that back with him. I think mainly because it kind of hurt my feelings, you know.
Right.
But he was in ICU, and I went to go visit. And that day, I decided to tell him everything that I felt, because I wasn't one that did that. So not that I wasn't one to do that. It was solely, again, because my feelings were hurt that he never did that with me.
Right.
And so, but I wanted him to know how much I appreciated him and how much I cared about him and that kind of thing. So I told him everything that I felt. Well, so he had a tear come to his eye. And I mentioned it to the nurse, and she said, well, he can't hear you because the swelling on his brain affected his brainstem, and which in turn affected his hearing. So he can't hear you. That's just a reflex. Well, that bothered me a lot, of course. And that night I went back to San Antonio. And I get a phone call first thing in the morning. He had passed. And it was incredibly devastating to me. I had never experienced death in my life. You know, the day that this all happened, I was supposed to fly with the Blue Angels. And, you know, I was such a, I would do anything at that point. You know, I was very adventurous, I guess. Mm-hmm. No fear of anything. But I had never experienced death in my life. And so it was extremely traumatic to me. And it was extremely hard for me because I didn't know if he heard me. It was killing me that I didn't get to tell him how much I appreciated him and the different things that I had said to him that night. And so I spent days crying in my room, and I never let my children see that. I didn't want them to see me upset about it. So I'd go in and cry in the closet or whatever. And he had a big golf tournament that weekend. So we dressed him in his golf attire. And he had just bought some new golf shoes. And in fact, the last thing he said when he left work that day to the guys at work was he was going to kick their butt at golf that Friday. And so anyway, we have the funeral, and he's, like I said, dressed in the golf attire. My sister bought the shirt and I bought the shorts. And then my mom took the shoes that he had just bought to the funeral home. And again, I didn't know if I was going to survive this whole thing. I was really in a deep state of depression because of not knowing if he heard me. And so one day I was walking downstairs and my ex-husband said, hey, Reagan has to tell you something. And I said, what's going on, baby? And she said, I saw Grandpa Stoll last night. She's 4 years old. Okay. 4 years old. She said, I saw Grandpa Stoll last night, and he said everything is okay. He's with Jesus. He had butterflies around him, and he wanted me to tell you that everything's okay. Oh my God. And I said, okay, thank you, baby. And I'm thinking, okay, she just had a dream. She turns around. Now, keep in mind, nobody, not a soul on this planet knew what I was going through behind closed doors in the closet, crying my eyes out, wondering if you heard me. I didn't divulge that to anybody. She turns around to walk away, turns back around to me, and she says, oh, yeah, he told me to tell you he could hear.
Oh, I had a feeling you were going to say that.
From the top of my head, I physically felt, it started at the top of my head and through my body, a physical feeling of peace went through my body. because I wasn't going to survive that. Like, I mean, I really wasn't. I was in a deep state of depression. And that was a gift that changed my life. And I feel that I experienced his death to be able to get through the different things that I just told you about, with my twins being early, with the loss of the baby, with Rylan, so close to death herself. If I had not experienced that, I would not have gotten through those other situations.
This is the first show that I've ever had tears in my eyes and goosebumps at the same time. You are a remarkable woman. Every one of those difficult moments in life could have crushed someone else. Any one of them. You had 4 of them in a 10-year time frame or so. Oh, yeah, 10-year time frame or something in that 10, 12-year time frame. Well, maybe it's because you're a Texan. I don't know, but that's a lot of strength. And I thank you for sharing that. It can be so challenging to share these type of moments in front of so many people that, you've never met before. And it takes a lot of courage. And you have a lot of courage, Stacy. Thank you for sharing that. It's an honor to have you share that on this show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a big changing point in my life. And it really made me realize that to say those things to those that you care about, regardless of what, circumstances there are. I mean, I didn't say things because he didn't say it to me. I don't do that anymore. I never hang up the phone without telling my loved ones that I love them. If, here's the thing, that Sunday before this happened on a Tuesday. On that Sunday, we drove up to my parents' house and stopped by there for a minute. And my dad wanted to go to dinner. And I told him no, because I was on my way somewhere else. And I said, we'll do it later on this week. Well, I never got that chance. And so I never do that ever. I've never done it since. If my mom wants to do something, I'm going to go do it. We have such a short time on this earth. He was 55 years old. 55 years old. You never know when it's your last day. And that's why I'm a firm believer in you go after your dreams. You use that china, you wear that jewelry, whatever you want to do, you live for today, because he went to work that day not knowing it was his last day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's shocking. 55 years old.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you did survive all that, because you're blessing the world. You're blessing the world with every day by the sounds of it. You're blessing the world with your amazing career and profession, and now you're blessing me and the Bamboo Pack. So I thought you were going to say something about he said he could hear, and I still wasn't prepared. When you said it, instant goosebumps. And the whole thing about the dressing him in his golf clothes and his golf shoes, that brought a tear to my eye.
You know what was crazy about that was we had him dressed in his golf attire. And 2 weeks later, and there's a part of you that questions, well, was that really a dream? I mean, I knew it wasn't. And had he come to me, I would have thought it was a dream. And so it was amazing for him to come to my 4-year-old. And, what a blessing that was. And she had no idea. But 2 weeks after his funeral, my sister called me. Now, let me backtrack just for a second. At the end of that conversation with my daughter, I said, what was he wearing? And she described what he was wearing. And I thought, she probably, could see him in the casket. But I knew, the way the casket is, you can't see the shoes. So I said, well, what shoes was he wearing? And she said, well, he wasn't wearing any. And so that made me question it a little bit. Well, 2 weeks after the funeral, my sister calls me and she says, Stacy, you are never going to believe this. I just talked to Mom. She got to the funeral home late that day. They already had him dressed and ready in the casket, so they just laid the shoes next to his body. He was not wearing shoes.
There's just more layers of this story. It's so difficult to hear stories like this and not believe there's something.
Absolutely.
My mother.
Go Go ahead.
My mother's lifelong partner passed away a year ago yesterday. And they were together for many years. He was a great man. They had a beautiful relationship. And this morning she texted me and she said, "Good morning, hon." She said, "I had a dream about Chuck last night." And she said, "It's the first dream I've had since he passed." And she said, and then it's coincidental it happened on the day of the anniversary of his death. No, maybe he was in her mind a little more or something like that. And he was coming to her. He was coming into the house, trying to get into the house. And I said, "Mom, that was him just saying he's here. He's still visiting." And those stories, you hear those stories countless times throughout your lives, and we still doubt. And I think even firm believers you still have that hinge of doubt a little bit. But I really, it's hard to even fathom the coincidence of that. It's beyond any mathematical possibility that it's a coincidence. It's just not possible.
Well, I mean, Reagan had no idea that I was wondering if he could hear.
Right.
So for her to even say that, I mean, I definitely felt like it was God blessing me with that in order to get through. And it made me appreciate things more. Again, I was fortunate to have two dads,
Mm-hmm.
my birth dad and then my dad. I call them both dads. So it's so hard. I don't call him a stepdad or anything. So it's made me appreciate more. And, my mom, again, is my best friend, and we talk probably 10 times a day. She's never missed one of my shows. But it's made me really make sure that with my mom and my dad, who is living, that I try to be a better daughter.
That's a good lesson for all of us. So we could probably do another episode together just on that topic. I think I want to explore that a lot more. I'd like to. But I'd like to ask you another question, Stacy, as we move forward here. Is right now at your stage in life, professionally and personally, what do you consider to be a win for you?
Gosh, I've had a lot of wins professionally. Again, going to the Middle East and being able to interview so many wonderful people throughout my career, and the people that I can connect with through home shopping is really interesting. In home shopping, you don't really think of that as necessarily being able to connect with people, but these people are my friends. They reach out to me, and I feel an incredible closeness with all of the viewers, and so that's a big win, being able to do that and gain the friendships that I have over the years through the career that I've had. But I would say my biggest win is the people that my children have become. And that is my biggest accomplishment, is seeing them grow into these wonderful, kind, compassionate human beings.
That might be the best answer I've ever had for that question. I look back and you had the twins born so early, what was it, 3 months in ICU, 8 months with a heart monitor at home. I know how hard it is to raise a child that's healthy. But when you have children who are really, you're constantly worrying, constantly sleepless nights, obviously. Then you have your miracle, and you obviously suffered a miscarriage, which is such a challenge because that happened in our family. 2 years ago with my daughter, she suffered one, and it's you talk to people, then you share that story because you're heartbroken as well, and they say, well, oh, we went through that, or my child went through that, or my daughter went through that. People don't really talk about that, so people feel so isolated when that happens because it's not really a common topic. And then of course your miracle baby coming on with, you saved her life. I mean, you had to save her life literally by just demanding that you do the ultrasound or whatever it might be, the test, and then losing your dad and all of that. And I mean, when you go through all that, even with children with really no real mishaps or health issues when they're young, you still are so proud of your children. I mean, I'd say that I think the same thing of my children. I look at them and I'm shocked how I did that, or at least contributed to it, because they are far better people than I am. They're far better than I was at that age. There's no doubt. So, but with what you've gone through, I can really imagine there is this just I mean, there's just got to be this immense pride that, there's so many things could have gone wrong back at that time when all three of them were born. And yet you pulled them through, and now you're looking at them and say, man, they're so kind and compassionate people. And I think that's just a remarkable answer to that question.
Yeah, I have 5 blessings. So I had actually, when I had the twins, I had 3 children in 1 year. So I had my son in January, and then the twins were born in October of the same year. And then I have an 18-year-old now and a 13-year-old. So I have 5 beautiful blessings.
Oh, that's quite a brood.
It is.
You're only 4 away from a baseball team now.
I know.
Stacy, if you were to go back and talk to that young lady who went into that dealership to get that job so she could have that demo car, and you and I were to go in a time machine right now, we're going to go back to that moment, and you were going to sit down and talk to that 22-year-old version of yourself, what would you say to her? What would you say are some guidelines or some recipes for success that you've learned in the journey so far?
I would say, don't let others bring you down. Don't let somebody else deter you from going after your dreams. I mean, I didn't do that so much, but I will tell you that, and especially in this industry, you do get negative feedback from people. They may not like your hair or your makeup that day, or they'll be critical of what you're wearing. And, you can't let other people's words hold you back from achieving the things that you want in life. We're all equal human beings on this planet, and their opinion is no better than yours. So I would probably tell myself because it affected me initially. Sure. Now it doesn't so much. I kind of just blow it off. But I would say probably, have a little bit of thicker skin and let that stuff roll off.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of interviewing a guest a few weeks ago who has a massive social media following, and just a charming, amazing 25-year-old woman. And she posted on social media yesterday that she's been getting a lot of hate from people, and she's to the point where she had to block people. And she quoted this. I asked her a question. He said, "What's your greatest learning or something?" And she said, "I can't fail at being me." And so I posted her yesterday. I sent a message to her saying, "Remember, all those critics, you just do what you do," because she does a great job. She's an amazing person. I said, "You can't fail at being you." And you could tell these people coming after her it was really affecting her. And she's so bubbly and so energetic and so kind and cheerful. But it affected her, but at that age, she was able to flip a switch and say, "Wait a minute, no, get rid of those people and focus on all the beautiful people who are commenting how much they love what I do and my style." And she flipped that switch relatively fast at a fairly young age. I don't think at 25 I could have done that.
Yeah, that would have been difficult for me as well. But, one thing that kind of hit me hard one day, and I don't mean to sound like overly religious, but this hit me real hard. Think about how Jesus was ridiculed. And if he can't or couldn't have, what's the right word? If he couldn't have not encountered that, I guess. I don't know exactly how to put that. But, then how can any of us escape it?
Right.
So, I kind of look at it like that. And so I just, again, I let it roll off, because no matter what, there's going to be somebody that doesn't like you. So
years ago, I don't think we had 14 or 15 consultants working for me and some staff, and we had an office in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and somebody in the team at the time pulled up a website. They found that it was We Hate Brian Bosley website. They created this website, and we never found out who it was, but we think it was some people who we went to a company to coach, but we had to pick and choose certain people we would coach through our program. They had to qualify for it, basically. And they printed up the pages of the website, and I read it, and it was just just a bunch of garbage. And so I actually taped it up on the wall. When all my consultants flew back every Thursday and we had the team meeting on Friday, that was on the wall. And they were reading it and they're, why does he have this on the wall? So when I started the meeting, I said, I put this on the wall because it means we're making a difference. We're creating noise. And I said, it means people are paying attention. I said, this is an honor to have this on here. And eventually they took it down. Somebody took the website down because we didn't respond to it or whatever it might be. But I found that to be a big honor. And I still think I have those papers stapled somewhere, archived in files, but I'll probably never find them. But
that is absolutely brilliant. Yes, if you think of it as an honor. Yeah. I like that a lot.
I mean, the more people you reach in the world, the more enemies you're going to make. You're going to make a lot more friends, but you're going to make more enemies than if you just stay home and watch TV. But if you're going to stay home and watch TV, stay home and watch Shop LC.
That's right. Well, when I'm on air.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Stacy, you're living an incredibly interesting and fascinating life. So what's next for you?
Gosh, I want to, my goal is to really work on balancing my life and enjoying again each day. Like I said, over the past 3 years, it's really kind of hit me hard that we really need to just enjoy each day and balance that time between work and living. So my goal is to do that. I'm going to keep chugging along but I've got some bucket list items, so I'd like to accomplish those.
I love it. I've got a client right now who's got a list of 300 things he wants to do before he dies.
Wow.
That's a big list. I don't think I'd come up with 300 things. I mean, they're all obviously not massive things, but all right. As we wrap up, I'll ask the last question, and this is an important one because it kind of catches the things I missed. Stacy, was there a question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or is there a final parting message you want to leave with the Bamboo Pack?
I always end my shows with don't let anybody steal your sunshine. And the reason I say that is because so many people try to. And just like what we were just talking about. So I think I would end this with don't ever let anybody steal your sunshine.
I love that. So there are a few episodes where I'm trying to think as I'm taking my notes, what's the title going to be? What's the title going to be? Sometimes I have to go back through my notes and try to find a title. Sometimes one pops out. I think I have 4 or 5 already that are circled that could be potential titles. So I'll surprise you.
Okay.
So Bamboo Pack, think of that right there. Some of the things she just said, and there's so many here. And I would recommend if you listen to this while you are walking, running, hiking, driving, exercising, go back and listen to it again with a pad of paper and a pen and take notes because I get to talk to amazing people all day long, my clients and the podcast and while I'm speaking. I have a full page of notes, and I normally do, but this one here is a full page of notes with a bunch of things circled that I want to go back to. I love that. Don't ever let anyone steal your sunshine because they do, and that's exactly what we just talked about. That people tried to do to you at times when you were younger. People tried to do to me and my team with the website and my former podcast guests getting hate mail on social media. Don't ever let anybody steal your sunshine. Beautiful. All right. Well, we'll spend a few minutes after this talking, Stacy, and we're going to have you back on. I know that for a fact. So this is one I'm going to archive with a little star next to it and make sure we get you back on soon because there's a lot more depth in those stories that we could have dug deeper with. So,
yeah, it's been an absolute honor.
It has been. So, Stacy, thank you for being such an amazing guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast. Ladies and gentlemen out there, Bamboo Pack, please get out there this week. Sculpt your life. Find out who you want to be. Who's that true peak person? What is that true peak identity that lives within you? Sculpt away every day until you get closer and closer and closer to that target. In the meantime, I'll talk to you in a few days. I appreciate each and every single one of you.